2 hours ago, Canada's trade minister sat across from Trump's top negotiator for the first time in 5 months. The last time they tried to talk, Donald Trump canceled negotiations over a television commercial. Now they're back at the table. But the American opening demand just revealed this won't be a negotiation. It will be a surrender ultimatum. And Mark Carney's response suggests he's prepared to let CUSMA die rather than accept it. On March 6, 2026, Dominic LeBlanc met face-to-face with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Washington. The meeting marked the first direct talks since October 2025, when Trump canceled negotiations over an Ontario TV ad featuring Ronald Reagan warning against tariffs. The ad quoted Reagan's 1987 speech criticizing protectionism. Trump saw it as personal insult and ended talks immediately. For 5 months, silence. Trump escalated tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, autos, lumber, copper, and cabinets. Canada retaliated. Economic damage mounted. The mandatory CUSMA review scheduled for July 2026 approached with no framework. Now talks have resumed. But the context has changed fundamentally. When LeBlanc and Greer last met in October, Trump's tariffs were based primarily on IEEPA authority. Since then, the Supreme Court struck down those tariffs as unconstitutional. Trump pivoted to Section 122 authority, imposing new 10% global tariffs with CUSMA exemptions for compliant goods. The House of Representatives voted to terminate Canada tariffs, with 6 Republicans defecting to join Democrats. A federal judge ordered $200 billion in refunds for illegally collected tariffs, and Trump announced he has no intention of paying those refunds. Against this backdrop of legal chaos and political rebellion, Greer delivered the American opening position. In an interview with CBC before the LeBlanc meeting, Greer stated clearly, "Tariffs will be part of whatever trade deal is negotiated with Canada. Not tariff elimination. Not tariff reduction. Tariffs as a permanent feature of the Canada-U.S. relationship." The statement represented a fundamental rejection of the free trade principles underlying CUSMA. But before we break down what this means, if you find this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button so you never miss coverage like this. Greer outlined 3 American demands. First, eliminate supply management to open dairy markets. Second, drop streaming content requirements forcing platforms like Netflix to carry Canadian programming. Third, curtail trade with strategic competitors, primarily China. These aren't new. The U.S. raised all 3 during original CUSMA negotiations. Canada resisted, and the final agreement preserved supply management, cultural protections, and limited only third-party trade language. Trump now demands what he couldn't get in 2018, complete capitulation on sovereignty issues. Carney's response was measured but revealing. He pointed to 12 trade agreements Canada signed in 6 months. China deals reducing agricultural tariffs. India agreements on uranium and energy. Australia, Japan, ASEAN partnerships. The message: Canada has alternatives. This is what Carney prepared for. He systematically built infrastructure for a post-CUSMA economy. China opens $7 billion in agricultural markets. India secures uranium and energy exports. Pacific relationships create supply chains independent of America. Carney didn't build these to abandon CUSMA. He built them to negotiate from strength, not desperation. The timing matters enormously. CUSMA requires a mandatory review in July 2026. All 3 parties, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, must participate. The review can result in agreement renewal, modification, or termination. Trump has already called CUSMA irrelevant and suggested it may have served its purpose. His administration has threatened to break up CUSMA into separate bilateral deals, negotiating with Canada and Mexico independently rather than trilaterally. That threat reveals American strategy. By splitting Canada and Mexico, Trump believes he can extract maximum concessions from each. Canada loses the leverage of coordinating with Mexico. Mexico loses Canadian support. Both countries face bilateral pressure without the protection of a united front. It's divide and conquer applied to trade negotiations. But Carney's diversification strategy undermines that approach. If Canada has functioning alternatives to American markets, bilateral pressure loses effectiveness. Trump can threaten to terminate CUSMA. Carney can respond, "Go ahead. We'll survive." That's not bravado. It's backed by actual trade agreements creating actual alternative markets. Will those alternatives fully replace American trade? No. 75% of Canadian exports still go to the United States. But the alternatives provide enough cushion that Canada can negotiate without existential fear. The political context strengthens Carney's position. The House vote against Canada tariffs showed Republican fractures. 6 Republicans, Don Bacon, Brian Fitzpatrick, Jeff Hurd, Kevin Kiley, Thomas Massey, Dan Newhouse, defected to join Democrats. Newhouse explained, "The tariffs on Canada have harmed Washingtonians." Translation: tariffs hurt constituents, so party loyalty doesn't matter. This dynamic exists across border states. Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New York, all have massive Canadian trade exposure. Trump threatened before the vote, "Any Republican that votes against tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences." It didn't work. 6 voted against anyway. Senate passed similar anti-tariff legislation twice in 2025. Message to Carney: Trump's policy lacks stable congressional support. The Supreme Court ruling compounds Trump's negotiating weakness. By declaring IEEPA tariffs unconstitutional, the court eliminated Trump's most flexible tariff tool. Section 122 provides only temporary authority, 150 days, unless Congress extends it. Section 232 requires national security justifications that courts scrutinize. Section 301 requires specific findings of unfair trade practices. None of these authorities give Trump the sweeping discretion IEEPA provided. His tariff threats have less credibility when they require congressional cooperation or judicial approval. Carney understands this. The LeBlanc-Greer meeting wasn't about reaching agreement. It was about establishing positions before the July review. Carney wants it on record that Canada came to the table, engaged seriously, and demonstrated willingness to negotiate. When talks fail, as they likely will, Canada can point to American demands: dairy capitulation, cultural sovereignty elimination, China trade restrictions, as unreasonable. International audiences will see Canada as the reasonable party, and the U.S. as the aggressor. This matters because CUSMA termination triggers global consequences. The agreement underpins North American supply chains worth hundreds of billions annually. Termination would disrupt automotive manufacturing, energy markets, agricultural trade, and technology supply chains across the continent. Mexico would face similar disruption. European and Asian companies with North American operations would see their investments threatened. The global business community would pressure all parties to preserve stability. But Carney can survive that pressure more easily than Trump. Canadian public opinion strongly supports standing firm against American demands. Polls show majorities of Canadians view the U.S. as untrustworthy and support economic diversification. Provincial premiers, even conservative ones like Saskatchewan's Scott Moe, back Carney's strategy. Canadian business leaders, while concerned about tariff impacts, recognize that capitulating to Trump's demands would invite endless future demands. American public opinion is different. Polls consistently show majorities disapprove of Trump's tariff policies. The Pew Research Center found 60% disapprove of tariff increases. Voters blame tariffs for rising prices on consumer goods. The 2026 midterm elections approach in November. Democratic candidates are running on inflation and cost of living issues. Republican candidates in border states face constituent anger about tariff impacts on local economies. Trump's position weakens daily. The Supreme Court ruling limited his authority. The House vote demonstrated congressional resistance. The refund crisis creates fiscal uncertainty. State-level Republicans are breaking ranks. And Carney has built alternative markets that reduce Canadian dependence on American trade. The LeBlanc-Greer meeting revealed these dynamics clearly. Greer stated American demands: dairy, streaming, China restrictions, permanent tariffs. LeBlanc listened, took notes, and indicated Canada would respond through proper channels. No agreement. No breakthrough. Just the formal restart of a process both sides know will likely fail. 2 hours ago, trade talks resumed after 5 months of silence. What emerged wasn't negotiation. It was the beginning of CUSMA's end. Trump wants surrender. Carney is offering partnership with conditions. Those positions are irreconcilable. And July approaches fast. The question isn't whether Kuzma survives. The question is whether Trump or Carney can better manage the political and economic fallout when it dies. And right now, every indicator suggests Carney prepared for this moment, while Trump is improvising.